Hello viewers, in our last session we have discussed regarding agriculture income, casual income, tax evasion, tax avoidance and tax planning. Now, in this session I would like to discuss the very important aspect of the Income Tax Act, that is residency status, and all the provisions which are related to residency status are contained in section 6. Now, so far as the determination of residency status of an assessee is concerned, it is very important for calculating the taxable income of an assessee for a particular previous year. It means income earned by the assessee in the related previous year is taxable in the subsequent assessment year on the basis of his residency status he assumes in that previous year. It means, if we want to calculate the taxable income of an assessee, first of all we have to determine his residency status, because the taxable income is directly linked with his residency status he assumes in that particular previous year. Unless we determine his residency status, we cannot calculate his taxable income. Now, so far as residency status of an assessee is concerned, it has no relevance with his citizenship, both are quite independent. It means, a foreign national can be non-resident in the previous year, he can be resident in the previous year. At the same time, Indian citizen may happen to be non-resident in India in the relevant previous year. Now, an assessee may assume different residency status in various countries in the same previous year. It means, it is not necessary that an assessee must assume the same type of residency status in all the countries in the same year. He may have different residency status in different countries in the same year, but whatever he assumes the residency status in India, that is taken into consideration for calculating his taxable income and tax liability as well. Now, so far as assessee is concerned, he may have different residency status in India in different previous years. He may be non-resident in the last year, but he may become ordinary resident in the relevant previous year. Therefore, it is very essential to determine his residency status before we calculate his taxable income. Now, so far as determination of residency status is concerned, it is determined for an individual, for Hindu undivided family, a partnership firm, association of other persons, a company and every other persons. It means, we can determine the residency status only for these persons. It means, there is no need to determine the residency status of a local authorities, because it is always considered as resident in India. Now, we discussed the different residency status of individual, HUF and other assessees. So far as individual and HUF are concerned, they can be resident and non-resident. Further, they can be resident and ordinary resident, they can be resident but not ordinary resident, and they can be non-resident. But in case of other assessees, means other than individual and HUF, they can be either resident or non-resident in India. Now, first of all, we will be discussing the provisions as contained in section 6 for determination of residency status of an individual. It is better that first of all we should discuss the basic conditions as laid down in section 6 subsection first. An individual is regarded as resident in the previous year if he successfully satisfies any of the two basic conditions. First is, he is in India for a period of 182 days or more in the previous year. It means, if an individual wants to satisfy the first condition, he is required to be present in India for at least 182 days in the relevant previous year. Now, so far as calculation of 182 days are concerned, we take into the account the day of departure and day of arrival in India. If the exact time of departure and exact date or time of we can say arrival is not given in the problem, or this is not provided by the assessee. Now, second is, he is in India for a period of 60 days or more in the relevant previous year and 365 days or more during 4 years preceding the previous year. It means, if an assessee is not in a position to satisfy the first condition, then he can satisfy the second condition, because there is a choice between the two conditions. if he is able to be in India for 60 days in the relevant previous year, at the same time if he is in India for not less than 365 days in last 4 years preceding the previous year, then second condition is satisfied. Now, so far as calculation of 365 days in last 4 years are concerned, 365 days means aggregate 365 days. He may be in India for some days in the last previous year, some days before that previous year, but he is required to be in India for 365 days in total in last 4 years. Now, so far as stay in India is concerned, a stay of 182 days in India at stress is not necessary. He may remain in India for some days, then he returns back, and after that he comes to India and again he remains for some days in the previous year. Now, while calculating the number of days, we have to see whether his presence in India is of 182 days or not. Now, at the same time, a stay of 182 days at one place in India is not necessary. He may remain in India at different places in 182 days in the previous year. It is not significant. The important point is that he must be in Indian vicinity for not less than 182 days if he wants to satisfy the first condition. Now, there are some exceptions. Exceptions means a person who is an individual and who is an Indian citizen leaves India for employment in the previous year, or as a member of the crew of Indian ship leaves for abroad in the previous year. Now, so far as the first exception is concerned, as we know that there are two basic conditions, first and second, but second condition is not applicable in respect of these two exceptions. It means the person who is going outside India and who is considered as Indian citizen of our country, then the person is required simply to be in India for 182 days. If he remains in India for 60 days and 365 days in last 4 years, that condition is not applicable. At the same time, if an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin settled outside India and he comes on visit to India in the previous year, that person is also required to satisfy only the first condition, and that is 182 days. It means we can say that so far as the condition B is concerned, it is not applicable in respect of these two exceptional categories. Now, who is Indian origin? A person who is considered of Indian origin if he or his parents or his grandparents was born in undivided India. It means if a person who is born in India, but he is now settled outside India and he is, has received the citizenship of other countries. So, at present he is not Indian citizen, but he is considered a person of Indian origin, or his parents or his grandparents, maternal parents or paternal parents, both are inclusive in this case. If they are born in undivided India and they are settled outside India and they got citizenship of other countries, so they will continue to be citizen of other countries, of course, but so far as the Indian origin are concerned, so they are always considered the person of Indian origin. Now, second is additional conditions. Additional conditions are contained in section 6 subsection 6. Now, first condition is he has been resident according to the basic condition in any at least 2 out of 10 previous years preceding the relevant previous year. It means if an individual wants to satisfy the first additional condition, he is simply required to be in India for either 182 days or 60 days in the previous year and 365 days in last 4 years, or we can say that first additional condition can be satisfied only when a person is able to satisfy any of the two basic conditions. And second is he has been in India for a period of 730 days or more during 7 years preceding the previous year. Second additional condition can be satisfied only when an individual is able to be present in India for 730 days in last 7 years before the previous year. How can we determine the residency status of an individual? So far as an individual is concerned, he is considered as resident and ordinary resident in India only when the person is in position to satisfy any one of the basic condition and at the same time he fulfills both of additional conditions. But he is regarded as resident but not ordinary resident in India if he succeeds to satisfy only one basic condition, but is unable to satisfy both of additional conditions. But an individual is regarded as non-resident in the previous year for calculating taxable income and his tax liability as well, if he is not in a position to satisfy any of the two basic conditions. In that case, it is insignificant, it is irrelevant to verify whether an individual is in position to satisfy both of additional conditions or not. Now, so far as calculation of number of days in India is concerned, sometimes we find a person in India only for a part of the day, then calculation of physical presence in India should be an hourly basis. A total of 24 hours in over a number of days is to be counted and will be considered the stay of one day. It means if any person who comes to India for some hours, then he goes back. Again he comes back to India for hours and goes back. Then we have to take into account the stay of a person in India on the basis of the hours. As soon as the total of 24 hours is complete, this is regarded as complete one day. So, we can say that stay of every hour is very important for determination of residency status of individual in the relevant previous year in India. Now, after determination of residency status of an individual, now we come to how we can determine the residency status of an Hindu undivided family in India. Now, so far as HUF is concerned, it is either resident or non-resident in India, or at the same time a resident HUF is either ordinary resident in India or resident but not ordinary resident in India. Now, so far as HUF is concerned, it is considered a resident in the previous year if its affairs are fully controlled and managed in India, and if affairs are fully controlled outside India in the previous year, then this is regarded as non-resident in the previous year. Now, when HUF becomes resident and ordinary resident in India, if the affairs of HUF are either partially and fully controlled and managed in India, and at the same time the Karta and manager of HUF is in a position to satisfy both of additional conditions which are prescribed for an individual in section 6 in the previous year. It means we can say the HUF becomes resident and ordinary resident in the previous year only when its affairs must be either partially and fully controlled and managed in India, but that is not enough. After that we have to see whether Karta of HUF is in position to satisfy both of additional condition in the previous year or not. Now, so far as HUF is concerned, it becomes resident but not ordinary resident in the previous year only when its affairs are either partially and fully controlled and managed in India, but Karta is not in a position to satisfy both of additional conditions which are prescribed for an individual. Now, HUF becomes non-resident in the previous year if its affairs are fully controlled and managed outside India. In this case, we can say the role of HUF becomes irrelevant. If Karta is able to satisfy both of additional conditions, then it will have no impact on the residency status of HUF in the previous year. So, we can say that HUF is considered a non-resident if its affairs are fully controlled and managed outside India. In this case, we are not to verify whether an Karta is in a position to satisfy both of additional conditions or not. Now, as we have seen that there must be control and management of HUF in the previous year. Now, we should know what is the meaning of control and management. Control and management is situated at a place where the head, the seat and directing powers are situated. Now, it gives a message that so far as the affairs of HUF are concerned, they must be directed, regulated in India either partially and fully. Suppose members of HUF all are staying outside India or all are staying in India. It is not going to determine whether the affairs of the HUF are partially and fully controlled in India or outside India. It is very important to note whether policies are formulated, that place is very important. from where the directions are given for the performance of the activities in India. If all the directions are given from outside India for the performance of business activities in India, it means the business is fully controlled and managed outside India. Sometimes what happens, some decision can be taken in India, only sole decisions taken in India that constitutes partial management in India. So, we can say that we have to see the place where formulation of policies and directions for the performance of the business activities are given or not. From outside India, if directions are given, it means the control is located outside India. If directions and policies are formulated in India for the performance of business activities in India, then we can say the business is fully controlled and managed in India. Now, how can we determine the residency status of a firm and association of persons? A partnership firm or AOP is either resident or non-resident in the previous year in India. It means AOP and partnership firm can be either resident or non-resident. Resident means if control and management of its affairs are either fully or partially situated in India. It means if the business of partnership firm or business of AOP or BOI are controlled and managed either fully or partially from India, then we can say that partnership firm is regarded as resident for the purpose of calculating taxable income and tax liability. But it becomes non-resident when if its affairs are wholly controlled and managed outside India. If business activities are being conducted in India, but all the business activities are controlled and managed outside India. We make the policies outside India, we give the directions from outside India, but activities are conducted in India. It means the business is fully controlled and managed outside India, and in this case the partnership firm EOP or BOI is regarded as non-resident. Now, in this case it is very important to note that partnership firm EOP and BOI, they cannot be ordinary resident or not ordinary resident in India. It means simply they are either resident or non-resident. Now, at the same time, it is very important to note that residency status of the partners members has no impact on residency status of a firm AOP and BOI. It means partner and partnership firm both are different associates. When you determine the residency status of a partnership firm, we never see whether partner is resident or non-resident, because so far as determination of status of a partner is concerned, that is for an individual, but when we determine the residency status of a partnership firm, this is a separate entity and both are used separately for determining taxable income and tax liability. So, the status of a partner will not have any impact on residency status of a firm. Suppose a partner becomes ordinary resident, but the partnership firm has become non-resident, so that will continue to be non-resident because it remains unaffected by the status of a partner. Now, after determining the residency status of a partnership firm AOP and BOI, now we have to see the provisions which are in relation to determination of residency status of a company in India. Now, so far as Indian company is concerned, Indian company is always resident in India. Now, what is Indian company? Indian company means a company which is incorporated, formed, registered in India, and that is always resident. Now, in this case there is no need to verify whether its affairs are controlled in India or its affairs are controlled outside India. Once we come to know that a particular company is an Indian company, this is always resident. But in case of a foreign company, it is either resident or non-resident in India. Now, a foreign company becomes resident only when its affairs are wholly managed and controlled in India. It means a foreign company will become resident only when its business is fully controlled and managed in India. It means, but in case of partnership firm, we have found that if affairs are partially controlled in India, that is enough and partnership firm becomes resident, but that is not so in case of a foreign company. In case of foreign company, it becomes resident only when its affairs are fully controlled and managed in India, but it becomes non-resident if control and management of its affairs are either partially or wholly located outside India. If business of a foreign company is either fully controlled from outside India or it is partially controlled from outside India, then it becomes non-resident. Now, why there is some difference? On one hand, we can say that partnership firm becomes resident only when its business is partially controlled in India, but that is not so in case of a foreign company. This is for the very simple reason that we want to attract multinational foreign companies to work in India, because after that we will be discussing the scope of income. Then we will see that the moment a company becomes a resident, it will be inviting lot of tax liability, lot of income will be taxable. So, every company, every SSC will try to be non-resident in the previous year, so as to minimize his tax liability and taxable income as well. Now, so far as company is concerned, a company can never be ordinary resident or not ordinary resident in India. It is simply a resident and non-resident in the previous year. Now, we discuss how to determine status of every other persons. Every other person means, as we discussed, individual, HUF, partnership, firm, company. But besides all these, if we are to determine the status of every type of other person, then these provisions will be applicable. Now, every other person is either resident or non-resident in the previous year. Every other person becomes resident only when its affairs are either fully or partially controlled and managed in India, but it becomes non-resident if control and management of your affairs are fully controlled and managed outside India. Dear viewers, in this session we have touched upon many points which are in relation to determination of residency status. We have discussed at length the provisions in relation to determination of residency status of an individual and how it is determined, and for that purpose we have discussed the provision of section 6. At the same time, we have discussed at length the provisions in relation to determination of Hindu undivided family, partnership firm, association of other persons and body of individuals. At the same time, we also discussed regarding determination of residency status of a company. In this case, we have discussed two types of the companies, Indian company and foreign company. Thank you. Now, there are some exceptions. Exceptions means a person who is an individual and who is an Indian citizen leaves India for employment in the previous year, or as a member of the crew of Indian ship leaves for abroad in the previous year. Now, so far as the first exception is concerned, as we know that there are two basic conditions, first and second. But second condition is not applicable in respect of these two exceptions. It means the person who is going outside India and who is considered as Indian citizen of our country, then the person is required simply to be in India for 182 days. If he remains in India for 60 days and 365 days in last 4 years, that condition is not applicable. At the same time, if an Indian citizen or a person of Indian origin settled outside India and he comes on visit to India in the previous year, that person is also required to satisfy only the first condition, and that is 182 days. It means we can say that so far as the condition B is concerned, it is not applicable in respect of these two exceptional categories. So far as an individual is concerned, he is considered as resident and ordinary resident in India only when the person is in a position to satisfy any one of the basic condition, and at the same time he fulfills both of additional conditions. But he is regarded as resident but not ordinary resident in India if he succeeds to satisfy only one basic condition, but is unable to satisfy both of additional conditions. But an individual is regarded as non-resident in the previous year for calculating taxable income and his tax liability as well, if he is not in a position to satisfy any of the two basic conditions. In that case, it is insignificant, it is irrelevant to verify whether an individual is in position to satisfy both of additional conditions or not. A person who is considered of Indian origin if he or his parents or his grandparents was born in undivided India. It means if a person who is born in India, but is now settled outside India and is has received the citizenship of other countries. So, at present he is not Indian citizen, but he is considered a person of Indian origin, or his parents or his grandparents, maternal parents or paternal parents, both are inclusive in this case. If they are born in undivided India and they are settled outside India and they got the citizenship of other countries, so they will continue to be citizen of other countries, of course, but so far as the Indian origin are concerned, so they are always considered the person of Indian origin.